Earlier yesterday at 7:58 a.m. local time, the ground began to shake back and forth in Mexico City, causing skyscrapers to visibly sway back and forth. A strong earthquake had just struck, but was not centered near Mexico City, instead originating far to the south 60 kilometers east of Acapulco. During the 10 to 20 seconds that the earthquake lasted for, items fell off of shelves, fragments of plaster fell off of buildings, and in at least one instance, interior ceiling panels collapsed. While damage was caused, it was not widespread, with total economic losses likely totaling under $1 million. No direct deaths were reported either, although sadly one indirect death did happen. The reason for the relative lack of damage despite the earthquake's magnitude was its fairly deep depth. Unlike more typical shallow earthquakes that strike at depths of 10 kilometers or less, the January 2nd quake struck at 35 kilometers depth. This means that much seismic energy dissipated before it reached the surface, resulting in the strongest ground motion only being M6, albeit with likely highly scattered instances of M7 shaking due to seismic amplification from ground sediments. The earthquake occurred on a thrust fault where the hanging wall moved up adjacent to the footwall at an angle of less than 45 degrees. This earthquake was interplay in nature, occurring at the boundary of two tectonic plates. To the southwest of Mexico City, the offshore Cocos Plate is subducting underneath the North American Plate. The friction from the downward motion of the Cocos Plate also pulls downwards the edge of the North American Plate, causing strain to build up until it is released by an earthquake, partially snapping back upwards. This is exactly what occurred on January 2nd. Now, this earthquake was not a megathrust due to its magnitude not being sufficient to be considered as such. It also did not occur within either of Mexico's two so-called seismic gaps, in other words, long segments of the tectonic plate boundary that have not produced a major earthquake in a long time, as strain builds that have a high chance of eventually producing a future major earthquake. Thus, the chance of either of those events happening in the future has not changed, as none of the strain related to them was released by yesterday's earthquake. This 6.5 quake was the largest to strike Mexico since a magnitude 6.8 quake struck in 2022, and earthquakes of this magnitude or larger have struck somewhere in Mexico 30 times since the year 2000. In other words, magnitude 6.5 or larger earthquakes strike somewhere in or offshore of Mexico about once every 10.4 months. If you are wondering, no volcano should have been affected by yesterday's earthquake, as the most a regional active volcano experienced was MMI 3.3 shaking, and for a volcano to even have a theoretical chance to be affected by an earthquake, it needs to experience at least MMI 5 shaking. More aftershocks are expected following yesterday's earthquake, and these aftershock events should decrease in abundance as the time since the January 2nd earthquake increases, and statistically speaking, the largest aftershock will likely be around a magnitude 5.3. Already, a magnitude 4.5 aftershock was noted. The odds of an even larger earthquake being triggered are low, with a statistical world average for any earthquake triggering a larger earthquake being 5%. Thanks for watching. As a final note, I would like to thank my new YouTube channel member Kaya the Camera Dog for supporting my work.